Hi, Pocket. In this video, I start running. And you should too. I'm on my way. In Monster Hunter Wilds, when you hunt a specific monster 20, 30, 40, and 50 times, you are given a title. These titles do nothing mechanically, but socially, they're as endgame as it gets. I mean, who doesn't want to hold the title Black Flame Abyss? I'll be hunting them all in this fashion, 50 of each. This time, I'm hunting Nu Udra, who I affectionately call Fire Octopus. Nu Udra unlocks the titles Nu Udra, Black Flame, Inferno, and Abyss. Before starting the hunts, I already hunted 7 Nu Udra, but I'll still be hunting another 50, up to 57. This time with the Lance, my first time ever using this weapon in a Monster Hunter game. Taking on Nu Udra, apex predator of the Oil Well Basin. These were 50 tempered-only Nu Udras. We've seen brute wyverns, temnocerans, fanged beasts, leviathans, a flying wyvern, and an amphibian, but with Nu Udra, we witness our first cephalopod, and this one's extra special because the species cephalopod didn't exist before Monster Hunter Wilds. This species of monster includes Nu Udra and Zu Wu, and it's super fresh. Nu Udra was the first monster in the story that I felt really challenged by. I heard that this was the case for some other players as well, and I wonder how much of that is because of this new monster type. Especially with super iconic flying wyverns, there's a lot of behaviors and attacks that experienced hunters can expect, having fought hundreds of Rathians and Rathaloses. Rathaloses? If a hunter can get behind them, it's usually a bit safer. Monsters will usually have to turn around before they can attack, or will do an attack to turn around, and forcing them into these situations can be predictable and useful. Because of that, Nu Udra threw me off originally. With its arms around its body, Nu Udra doesn't need to turn around before attacking, and can sometimes just attack with its back tentacles or side tentacles, foregoing that initial telegraph that I usually look out for. I love this detail. Nu Udra and Zu Wu both also have devastating long-ranged attacks, Nu Udra with its fire jet, which means it's not only dangerous from all sides, but also dangerous at variable ranges. Also, for tail severer's sake, each of Nu Udra's arms can be severed, which is very satisfying. It's like 6 tails in one. And yes, there are only 6 Nu Udra tentacles, which means Fire Octopus is not that accurate. It's more like Fire Sextopus? Yeah, that sounds really weird. I'm never gonna say that again. I've heard some chatter that maybe Nakarkos, an old monster introduced in Generations, might even get put into the cephalopod species, but I doubt it. If only because Nakarkos is an elder dragon, and very unique. Still, I'd love to see more cephalopods in the future, and now that they exist in the world, golly, such potential. Speaking of that fire jet move, which nearly wiped me out in all my previous hunts with Nu Udra, it is incredibly easy to simply guard through it with Lance. Going into this stalwart guard stance is something I've never seen before, and is so insanely, excessively cool, anime-inspired, absurd strength, trudging through literal fire and flames. I was so distracted by how awesome the animation of this is that I didn't even realize there was a counter rush that can be done that'll have the hunter rush all the way through and knock Nu Udra out of the attack. I could see this being very useful in multiplayer hunts to quickly cancel the attack if another hunter is in danger. Having this kind of responsive control over the monster's attacks is so awesome. It's like a special offset. If you can manage to get close enough to Fire Octopus before it begins the fire jet, it can be a great damage opening where it stands still and lets you chop it up for a while, but it won't start casting the move unless the target is a decent distance away. It loves to do this move after a teleport in Area 17 of the Oil Well Basin. Trudging through the flame is so metal, and the first time this happened, my jaw dropped. So insanely cool. Something else strange about the fire jet is that it's not terribly consistent in its range. I noticed that in some areas, or when Nu Udra was enraged, the fire would travel for a really long ways, but it interacts oddly with slopes, and sometimes it doesn't travel that far at all, and I was just guarding right outside. A little silly, I'm not entirely sure why. It seems mostly based on where it is in the environment, and if it's all flamed up or whatever. The Den of Nu Udra. This is where Nu Udra likes to go to sleep when it is weak, and it also has some special moves in this area. While in Area 17, Fire Octopus can scuttle into the ground like this and teleport elsewhere in the arena, and as I mentioned before, it likes to do the Fire Jet move right after creating that distance. When traveling to Area 17, if Nu Udra decides to go by foot instead of fast traveling with its tunnel system, we can even see it schlorp along the pipes here on the ceiling, a really neat touch. It reminds me of how Duna swims across the little rivers or up the waterfall, a creative way of seeing the Apex's familiarity with the locale. Alas, because of Fire Octopus's tendency to simply hop into a wall and then fast travel across the map, it's unfortunate that we don't get to see many other unique movements from it because it's all done behind the scenes. Nu Udra is immune to flash pods. This is a bitter pill. This means that when Nu Udra starts to leave the area, without a mount or a trap ready, it's not easy to prevent. I thought this would be a good opportunity to try out luring pods, which is an interesting idea. It'll force a monster to attack the hunter for a while building up resistance to the same luring pod effect, just like flash pods does. The duration isn't too long, so it never really resulted in me being able to finish the monster off, but it was nice to keep it fighting before it sunk into a wall and vanished across the map. Even worse, actually, when firing a luring pod on Nu Udra as it's departing, if the hunter isn't quick enough, the effect will persist on Nu Udra when it arrives at the new zone it's fleeing to, which sometimes causes it to immediately move areas again to try and go back to the hunter, before deciding to leave again to go back to where it wanted to go in the first place. While luring pods let me get a few extra hits in, especially with a monster like this that has fast travel networks, it ended up being more trouble than it was worth. Because I don't use traps in these 50 hunt videos, unless my Palico puts one down, that's kind of cheating. When it was time for Nu Udra to leave, I either mounted it or mounted my Sacred, and came to terms with the slog of running back and forth across the world over and over and over. I'm fairly certain I spent more time chasing Nu Udra around the map than I have with any other monster. Like Ajarakan, Nu Udra's fire can be turned off with puddle pods, but I found it a lot less effective than it was with the Fire Monkey. A single well-aimed pod could turn off Ajarakan's empowered state right away, but with Nu Udra, it required multiple pods fired accurately at the flaming tentacles to turn them off. This was difficult enough that I only pulled it off a single time. If there's an easier way to do this that I missed, I'd love to hear it. I kept trying out new things with puddle pods, but it was a struggle through and through. Also, like Ajarakan, Nu Udra has a grab. For this move, it'll open a little vent on the shoulder there and blast the hunter with fire if successful. Knife your way out quick. Also, like Ajarakan, it will use this move occasionally on your Palico, and okay, I hate to admit it, but this is an amazing damage opening. Look, even Mario knows that sometimes to get to the finish line you have to jump off a couple Yoshis. I don't think he's proud of it either, but sacrifices have to be made. In the turf war that Nu Udra has against Ajarakan, it will also pull this move, another incredible opening just to rip damage into Nu Udra. There isn't much else you can do anyways because of its immunity to flash pods. It's best to make good use of the openings these captured prey can give you. Ajarakan loves to show up to battle Nu Udra as well. It happened so many times in my 50 hunts that it almost felt like Ajarakan was my little Pokemon, having joined my arsenal after I hunted 50 of them. Thanks, buddy. Great work, great work. Nu Udra has a very easy weak point. So long as the attack is blocked or dodged, it loves to do this forward body slam, a lot like Duna's belly flops, and after the second one, its face lights up. The only hard part about this is that the tentacles are so close to the face that sometimes they'll take the damage from your focus strike and prevent it from making contact with the weak point. It'll take some practical knowledge of your weapon to sometimes steer your focus reticle a little bit and try to aim the focus strike more carefully. This weak point can also be struck from outside the tentacles if it's attacking another player or your palico. You can kind of reach through Nu Udra's body if you know where that weak point is going to be to trigger the knockdown. Not bad, not bad, and genuinely more consistent sometimes than attacking it from head on. My experience with the lance changed gradually through these hunts. I'm a bit like Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender when he was learning earthbending from Toph, one of the greatest fictional characters of all time whom I cherish greatly. In that story, Toph is trying to teach Aang to face his problems head-on, as is the earthbender way. Not dodging, not redirecting, simply facing the attack, unflinching and unyielding. Because of my experience with other weapons, I had this issue when learning Greatsword too, and still do. I have a tendency to dodge instead of guard, which is why I love the agile weapons like dual blades so much. With slower weapons who don't have as much evasive abilities, this can be a huge hindrance. An evasive hop with the lance doesn't go that far, and in my early hunts I was getting hit all the time because I hadn't built up the habit of using my shield. Nu Udra's 360-degree threat radius didn't make this any less punishing while I was learning. My years as a sword and shield player had ingrained a certain distrust of my shield. I saw my shield not so much a defensive tool, but a weapon, and if I wasn't punching monsters with it, I was making a mistake. This is far from the case with Lance, who uses the shield to constantly create new openings for itself, being able to brush off attacks with an easy block before going back to applying brutal and constant pressure. Once I had learned the rhythm of Nu Udra's attacks, it was toast. I felt like a stalwart wall, constantly jabbing until it surrendered. But then, I started practicing the ultimate move, the Lance's dash attack. For this move, the Lance player tells the Dungeon Master, "I would like to start sprinting like a race car." And the Dungeon Master says, "Make an athletics check." At which point, the Lance player flips the table, smacks the Dungeon Master across the face, catches the table and gently sets it back down to show off that they don't make athletics checks, they succeed athletics checks. After a brief duration running, the Lance starts zooming, and this was by far the most fun attack. During my later hunts, I kinda challenged myself to see how long I could keep charging without stopping. Nu Udra's a big monster, so it was fairly viable to simply run circles around it, watching it slap its tentacles behind me as I went, unable to keep up with the sheer, raw, Olympian-level strength put on display by the 3 points of Marathon Runner Lance, sprinting around like a deranged, vicious, unstoppable lunatic. This was so fun, even just to point toward the monster, angle the spear, and drill damage into Nu Udra's face. Not only is this a great way to move around the map, it's not as inflexible as it feels. You can jump for mounting hits, making this weapon really mounting accessible, and you can go straight into a block for an easy counter, or even do a 180-degree turn if you miss your target and want to re-aim. Utilizing this ability, Lance went from an immobile bulwark to a heat-seeking missile of constant, raw, unmitigated destruction. Nu Udra couldn't keep up, and I can't blame them. Wahoo! There's simply no stopping an infinitely charging Lance. I love this weapon, and I can't wait to use it in the future. Thank you to Yannick Gallant 1562 for recommending it to me. You are right. Nothing brings more joy than standing stalwart against a blast of fire. So cool, so cool. In the end, these hunts took me 8 hours, 27 minutes, and 8 seconds, which equals out to around 10 minutes and 9 seconds per hunt. The fights felt fine and fast, but not being able to effectively stop Nu Udra from leaving areas meant I spent a lot more time racing around the map to try and catch up to them after they'd schlorp into a pipe and vanish. This has been my longest 50 hunts so far, but one of the most fun. I gathered 279 hides, 100 horns, 241 oil mucus, 162 spikes, 93 tentacles, 115 certificates, 10 cerebrospinal fluids, and 26 flame gems. But most importantly, the titles Nu Udra, Black Flame, Inferno, and Abyss, that I may become Black Flame Abyss, Jouster of Demons. Fun fact, I actually hunted 51 Nu Udras, but on literally my second hunt, my game crashed on the loot screen and didn't save my progress. It did save that I had used a charge of that investigation though, gee thanks. Is there a weapon you'd like to see? Do you like octopus? Let me know. Up next we have... Wait a minute. Didn't I fight you already with Hunting Horn? Okay. I guess you count as a different monster, whatever. All the same, thank you for watching, fellow hunters. See you soon. Good luck, and goodbye.